pickleball first, so if you're here for pickleball, stay. If you're not, would you mind leaving or going downstairs?
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Please?
That includes department heads. You can step out for this.
Department heads can go in the back room if you want.
Jeremy, sit down. Why don't you make it?
I just want to let you know.
Oh, I got you. So it's already. Hey,
Yeah, I will do that.
thank you. Thank you. Call this meeting to order. It's the City of Rhinelander Common Council. It is Monday, May 24th, 2021 at 6 p.m. We are in the council chambers. The agenda has been posted. The media has been notified. Please call roll.
Christopher Fredrickson.
Here.
Thomas Barnett.
Here.
Andrew Larson. Carrie Mikulowski.
Here.
Thomas Kelly. Gerald Anderson.
Here.
David Holt.
Here.
Eileen Daniel.
Here.
Ryan Rossing.
Here.
All please stand. We'll take public comment first real quick. Carrie. Orange light.
I believe we're just doing pickleball stuff, but I have another comment. Is that okay if I swing it in quick? I'll try to be brief. Okay. Hello. My name is Carrie Bladorn. Everybody's laughing because they know I'm never brief. My name is Carrie Bladorn. I'm the director at Pioneer Park Historical Complex. First, I want to say that I understand the sentiment from those opposed to the windscreen about decreasing visibility to the museum and the iconic train engine in particular. The museum and its collection is very important to this community. It's important to me, and I work very hard to preserve and advocate for the complex. It is undoubtedly one of the best museums of its kind in the country. That's something for Rhinelander to be proud of. As the director at the Pioneer Park Historical Complex, I sympathize with those that would like to maintain as much visibility of the museum as possible, but I also understand the desire for the pickleball courts to have the windscreen. I understand the positive benefits the courts bring to the park and the community. I understand the windscreen is very important to the pickleball players for a number of reasons, many of which I'm sure we will hear this evening. And sometimes, when you're a good neighbor, when you care about other park user groups, when you try and understand other points of view, you work together. You make sacrifices. You find compromises if possible. With these understandings in mind, and my sympathy toward all points of view, I am here this evening to offer my personal support for the windscreen project. I've worked very hard to maintain good communications and good relationship with the pickleball players and club. I enjoy seeing the park filled with people and have enjoyed seeing the pickleball courts active in the time they've been open. The pickleball courts are there, and the tennis courts were there before them. The museum has been operating for 89 years this year. It is a well-known community gem, and it will be fine if a windscreen goes up. I do hope as a compromise, part of the windscreen can be used as a sign for the park and museum, and I will work with the city, the Parks Department, and the Pickleball Club to make that happen if possible. Thank you for your time. Moving on to the next item that I'd like to bring to your attention, and I'll forego the mentioning who I am again here. I'd like to address the council today in regards to a newly implemented blanket policy of drug screening for all city employees, regardless of discretion, circumstance, and common sense. The museum has been operating for 89 years. It is the oldest museum of its kind in the country. It has been operating 14 years under the latest City of Rhinelander purview, and I have been the director for 5 years. Never in all those years have museum staff ever been subjected to drug screening, nor was it ever mentioned. I'm here today to express my dissatisfaction with this blanket policy. Museum staff are paid $8 an hour for a job that amounts to a community service for the City of Rhinelander and the museum. Museum staff don't work at the museum for the money. They do it because they love Rhinelander, northern Wisconsin, its amazing history, and want to play a role in preserving and sharing it. For the work they do, I commend and hold them in the highest regard. They are ambassadors for this community, and they have a history of doing a wonderful job. I've been told that the drug screenings are for safety. In 89 years, not once has there been any documented issues that I could find with any museum staff member, and certainly not in the last 14 years under the city's operation. Given the staff's track record for being upstanding members of the community and excellent staff for the museum, that feels a little bit like an insult. I've been told it's for insurance purposes, a requirement by the insurance company. As I mentioned, this is the first time in my 5 years as the director it's ever been brought up, and I'm positive the city has held insurance for the time that I've been working at the museum. I've been told it's a liability issue. Museum staff do not operate city equipment or drive city vehicles and present some of the lowest risk of any city employee on the payroll. Museum staff members are temporary city employees, which means they sign a release from the city employment at the end of the season and have to reapply and be rehired every year to work at the museum. That means every single year these employees will undergo a drug screening. The city, via the museum, employs on average 20 paid staff members a season. Drug screening is not free, and it is paid for out of the budget of the taxpayer. Is this a good use of taxpayer money? I've talked to former and current city employees that have worked for the city in some of the most sensitive areas of work and were never drug screened. If museum staff are to be drug tested every year, that will make them the most drug tested group of employees, a group that presents some of the least amount of risk of any group of employees in the city's history. Is that appropriate? I don't believe it is. The closest type of employee the city hires in a temporary position are poll workers. They are not drug tested. Council members and the mayor, although elected officials, do get paid by the city of Rhinelander, and granted it is a modest stipend, and they are elected officials, are not drug tested either. If it is in fact a safety and liability issue, it is difficult for me to reconcile all these points together. I am disappointed with this new requirement. I'm disappointed that discretion, circumstances, and common sense have been put aside to uphold this blanket policy. Every year, finding enough employees to staff the museum and the commitment I ask of them is the biggest challenge I face as the museum director. It is hard enough to get people to work at the museum without putting up more hoops to jump through. Since I've been working at the museum, paid staff have all been okay with the background check, but the drug screening has proved too much for some of them. And for those that have agreed to it, some do so begrudgingly, myself included. This year, I've had some possible new staff and some staff that have worked at the museum for many years decide on principle alone that this new blanket policy was one they were unwilling to subject themselves to. These are not people worried about passing a drug screen. These are people that don't believe it appropriate given the circumstance. For many, it is a bridge too far. For some, this is the first time they were asked to perform such a requirement in the history of their time working at the museum, some of them more than a decade. It is sad to me, because of this policy, that the city of Rhinelander, the museum, and its visitors to the complex will miss out on some valuable minds in local history. These people added an important piece to the museum puzzle and enriched the experience of the complex staff and its visitors, and those are things you can't buy. The city of Rhinelander and the museum is poorer for this blanket policy.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second.
Sure.
For the sake of the fact that one, this is public comment, and I understand that you're stating this as a private citizen of the area, that's fine. And I'm going to extend you the courtesy of the extra time because you are also addressing us as an employee, but we're going to recognize it as that, so it's not recognized as just your comment, because I know we can't talk back afterwards, but that's why you get extra
I wanted
time.
to bring this up in a different capacity, but I figured this would be a good place to start, so I appreciate your time, and I'm almost finished here, so please bear with me. I understand the administration personnel I've talked to at length on this issue are doing their jobs, and none of my disagreement with this policy is personal. I do not bring this matter up to make waves. I work hard to have a good relationship with all city staff and appreciate the time and energy they spend working on museum matters. They have my utmost respect. But I would not be honoring my conviction if I did not bring this matter to your attention tonight. Given the circumstances, I ask, is this blanket policy fair? Is it right? Is it appropriate? Is it necessary? Is there leniency that can be applied given these circumstances? Must it be done annually for returning staff members with good track record? If it is this elected body's duty to set city policy, what capacity does this council have to consider these issues and make changes or set policy that is appropriate while using discretion on any particular issue? I think these are good questions to ask for the future of Rhinelander and for the future of Pioneer Park Historical Complex. Thank you for all your service to the city of Rhinelander, to your constituents, and for the hard work you all do. And as always, thank you for supporting our community repository of historic knowledge, Pioneer Park Historical Complex. Thank you.
Jill Bishop, we can't speak back to him.
No, I don't want to speak back. I want to make a motion.
I don't think you can make a motion from public comment. Is that correct? Yeah. Jill.
Yeah, I'd like to be understanding, Pioneer Park's been there for how long? And I just found out the ballpark could be coming down, knocked down. And when they changed it to pickleball, didn't they know everything that they needed had to go up? And why wasn't it worded in the contract for the pickleball court? And how many players do we really have? I heard 150. How are you going to gain players if you block the courts off so people can't see how to play it? It's just going to be an eyesore. So why do you have to block it off? People coming in from 17 Kemp Street, they're not going to see how, oh, look what they got going on. It's going to be blocked off. Are they ashamed of how they play that, one play in front, one play in back so they can hit the ball? Is that competitive, just like any other sport? So I don't know why certain things have to go after the court's up. So to me, you're not going to have that many athletic people in the future either, because everyone's stuck on their electronics. 7 to 13 hours a day, most people spend on them. They can't enjoy the outdoors mainly, just for their 1 hour. Well, if they want pickleball court to look like that for just 1 hour, fine.
Thank you. Moving on, that ends our, unless any older persons have any public comments? All right. Moving forward, I'll accept the motion.
Chris, what I want to do is make a motion to move number 11, the pickleball windscreen issue, up now, and we can take a vote on it right away.
Right away?
Why not?
I'll let you call that, we're going to, first of all, take a second on your motion.
Holt, I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second to move item 11 on our agenda up. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Agenda item number 11, unfinished business from previous council meetings, discussion and action items. Discuss or approve pickleball windscreens tabled on May 10th, 2021. I'll accept a motion.
I would make a motion to approve the pickleball windscreen that was tabled on May 10th.
We have a motion to approve it,
Daniel, second.
and we have a second. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Was there a presentation? I'd like to see that.
Absolutely. Jane?
Terry, you should also be able to share that screen so Ryan can see it. There you go. Oh, I have to. Okay,
Are we ready? Hey, I'm Jane Banning. I was here at the last meeting. I want to thank you for your time today. I also want to thank Kerry for his comments earlier supporting the windscreens via the Historical Museum's perspective. I have a few quick slides. You should have a summary in your packet, is that correct? Okay. I just want to clarify one point that was made earlier, or that was stated earlier, that there was a contract with the city to develop the pickleball courts. There was not a contract, but there was a resolution. It's my understanding that there was no contract at all, but there was mention of pickleball courts early on in a public meeting that one of our members had with the city administrator discussing, with Jeremy Biolo, discussing the various aspects of the pickleball court, which included nets, fencing, and windscreen. That is in her notes, and we can provide that documentation. I have windscreen samples to hand out in just a moment. One of them was what you saw earlier at the earlier meeting, but I'll pass these around in just a moment. This is one that we like. We haven't made a decision yet because we haven't been approved yet. So it would be nice to have a nice big sample to look at, but it's like going to the paint store. You get a little tiny chip, and that's what we have to work with. It's been very strangely difficult to get a large sample that we could hold up for you. I don't know why that is. I think it's a bad marketing decision on the part of the windscreen companies, but there you have it. I have props. This is a pickleball. This is a pickleball paddle.
You probably can save some time on some of the props just because.
Those are all the props I have.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I've got. That's literally it. That's an outdoor pickleball. There is no such thing as a heavy pickleball. This is what we have. It's like the weight of a football or the weight of a softball. So that is what we have. It's tougher than an indoor pickleball. That's a pickleball paddle. This is a petition with 42 names of neighbors to Pioneer Park in support of installation with addresses. I'll pass that around. I reached out to 8 city council members to make this meeting as efficient as possible, and I want to thank the 6 of you who got back to me. I really appreciate that. We are cognizant of and sensitive to the visibility nature that Carrie mentioned earlier. We are not ignoring that issue, and we're paying full attention to that as we go into planning with him, picking the best kind of windscreen possible, both for us and for the community at large. Tara, could you go ahead? Samples, so here you go. This is Packerland courts. Fence in the foreground is low because it's between courts, but you can see an example of windscreens. Next slide, please. Three Lakes, July of 2019. Three Lakes is getting new windscreens. We don't know what those materials are, but that's what it was in 2019. Next slide. Three Lakes also, next slide. Greater Waukesha area pickleball, those are almost fully transparent. Next slide. Point area pickleball courts, it's hard to see, isn't it? It's a little bit hard to see.
Are all the pictures taken from inside the courts?
Just about all of them.
Thank you.
It's really hard to get them from outside the court. I went to Facebook pages, I went to manufacturing pages, I looked all over. Next slide. So I think you can look at those trees on the other side of the fence and see the visibility there. Next slide. There are lots of vendors available. We've been looking at all of them. Next slide. There is professionally printed signage that we could work with Carrie Bladorn on in terms of the choice of their logo and a directional sign pointing to the entrance of the park. Next slide. Another sample. You can see right through that. That's outside of the courts. Next slide. Another example, and next slide. There are different levels of opacity, from 75% to 95%. We want to choose the lowest level of opacity or see-through ability as we can possibly do, given that we want a good product. Next slide. That's outside the court as well. Next slide. You can see the trees beyond that windscreen. Next slide. And also you can see beyond that windscreen as well. Next slide. That's our view from across Oneida Avenue. It's almost right in front of your house, Mayor. So we have a hard time seeing the engine, but I think what would help would be a sign with a logo and direction to the entrance of the park. Next slide. There's open mesh and closed mesh. You can get custom cut or cut to size. The materials vary quite a bit. We can also pick colors. We don't want colors. We want something that's going to blend in with the green that we have around the trees and the grass. So we would like to actually go with something very similar to this. Next slide, please. We did a little survey. 22 of our players have played at 333 other court complexes. We get around 333 other court complexes. So 293 of those courts had windscreens, which is 87.9%. They're very prevalent. Next slide. There are lots of advantages. Wind and kids and beginners aren't compatible. The courts are for everyone, though. This is a free and open public court, and all skill levels benefit from a better controlled environment. The pickleballs are wind sensitive. If you touch the pickleball, could we pass that around, please? The pickleball and the paddles. Thank you.
I think everybody saw it.
Oh, have they? Okay, thanks. Thanks so much. The pickleballs are wind sensitive. You're talking about 6 months of time outdoors. We'd really like to maximize that time and play as many days as we can. Thank you. The Dome and the YMCA have complications in terms of availability and cost. Not everybody can afford to join the Dome or to join the YMCA to play. Plus, the time is not available all of the time. Pioneer Park, as opposed to that, is free and accessible. Windscreens are standard equipment at tennis courts and pickleball courts nationwide. And the professionally printed signage promotes local attractions. Next slide. So we can maximize our play for as many days as possible, which helps everybody be happier when we're playing. It allows many people of many different skill levels to participate, which is what our goal is, which is health and engagement. Standard equipment nationwide, as I already mentioned. The windscreens will minimally impede visibility. It will draw people to Pioneer Park, as we've already seen, and to Rhinelander. It increases community health and engagement in pickleball. The windscreens are only up for 6 months or so. It's not like they're going to be there every minute. And it will draw attention. The windscreens will draw attention to the Railroad Museum with fresh new signage. Next slide, please. And of interest, on May 22nd, which was this last Saturday, there were 32 people playing. Every court was filled simultaneously with 6 to 8 waiting to play. This was an all-time high. Pioneer Park was rocking and rolling. There was that softball tournament going on too. I've never seen it so busy. It was fabulous. It was a happening place. Next slide. Thank you. We'll take questions if anyone would like to ask questions, and I may have some support from a consultant in the audience.
Okay. Gerald.
Do you know what degree of opacity this sample is?
I believe it's 90%. It's a higher opacity than what we may want, what we may get. So it may be easier to see through what we eventually buy. But we want to work with Carrie on this.
Tom.
I did call the pickleball org people, the USA org, pickleballusa.org. I called them because I wanted to do my due diligence and research myself. And they said that windscreens are useful and it does improve the game, but not necessary, but they recommend it. So I kind of got no answer there at all. So I guess my question would be, the windscreens would be down during like wintertime and all that?
Yep.
Do you have any options for roll-up?
Not that I've found online.
Okay. All right.
They are heavy to install and heavy to take down. It's not like a curtain that you can easily roll up and roll down. It takes 3 or 4 people with a ladder, and we're happy to do that, but we don't want to do that every other day. So.
Any other questions?
I don't have any questions necessarily for Jane, but are we moving into general discussions?
Yeah,
amongst
absolutely.
council members?
There's a motion on the floor.
Right. So that I just wanted clarity. I didn't want to speak first necessarily.
Okay. Gerald, you hit your mic.
Oh, okay. I guess as the motion stands, it's pretty bare. I would feel better about it if it said that we're going for the greatest degree of visibility through the screen, and that we'll be going for having some signage on it.
Are you making that friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay. So can you, for the clerk, add the friendly amendment?
To add to it the requirement that the screen be the lowest percent opacity and that there be provision for advertising the museum on it.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second.
Okay.
Tom?
I would like our council lawyer to speak on the legalities of the signage, if that's, is that in our ordinance to allow that kind of signage, or?
Oh. No, three things I think you better think about. Number one is we don't want to get trapped into this situation where you have no definitive contract or agreement. We already went through that. We had a memorandum of understanding that was given. There was, I don't know who ever said, it wasn't me that said there was a contract, so please don't misquote me. Second of all, there was never a discussion with us about screenage. I just talked to Jeremy a few seconds ago, or a few minutes ago now, and he indicated that, yes, there was some talk in February of this year, but certainly not when we approved this last year. The third thing is we need to have a contract that says there's nothing further that's going to be requested or done without the permission of the city, because we need to understand that this project, we need to know the details so that you know what you're voting on. So anything that you approve tonight, if you do approve, I think has to be caveated, as Gerald said, that you define the opacity of the screening. We can look into the other areas concerning how it's going to be connected, how often it's going to be taken up and put down. We got all those issues to work out. So I think that whatever motion you pass, if you pass a motion, that you also direct the city administrator, whomever you choose, to work and have a final contract that's presented to this body before you really ultimately say, put them up. So you know exactly what you're getting. Because I think that you don't want to be back here 3 months from now saying, well, that's not what we agreed to. That's not what I thought you said. And that's the only thing I would put as a caveat. You know, there's just been way too many misrepresentations as to what's been said and what's not been said, and I don't think we want to go back there.
I believe there was no official motion, but we discussed that this should be discussed with Jeremy Biolo, not necessarily Kerry. That being the case, I know Kerry did put out a poll, and if you'd like to discuss that, I also would like to ask our lawyer on behalf of our city staff if that's appropriate. To ask Kerry about his poll that he put out in his position with working with him.
You're the mayor. You can ask whatever you want. He spoke here tonight, so yeah.
That's why I'm asking you.
Well, if he hadn't spoke, but he's spoken, he's a city employee. So if the city employee did something while he was a city employee, he has a right, you have a right to ask him what he did. I don't know what he did.
Kerry? Is he here?
He left.
He left, all right. Excellent. That's that. Anybody have the poll tally?
Could you turn on your mic there, Carrie?
That was a poll taken at the historical Facebook site, the Historical Museum Facebook site, correct?
We're not in open session. We're discussing. We're not in open session. This only the council can speak unless we amend the rules to allow someone else to speak.
There was a Facebook poll, and the questions were not in favor of pickleball court windscreen, in favor of pickleball court windscreen, or okay with it if they include advertising for the free museum and perhaps an arrow indicating the direction of the entrance. There was 71 votes not in favor of the pickleball screen, 33 votes for in favor of pickleball court windscreen, and 15 votes of okay if they include the advertising.
The comments underneath it were deleted, I believe, or were taken down also.
No,
So I'm just,
there's 137
there is,
comments.
okay. I'm not going to ask you to read those.
I don't want to.
Thank you. Eileen?
I believe Dave had his hand up before I did, but
You're more than welcome to go first.
I will point out that, to be fair, anytime you have a Facebook page, your followers are obviously very much attuned to the activities at that particular venue. So the followers of the historical, Pioneer Park Museum are obviously going to be looking or thinking they're operating in the best interest of the museum. I'm sure if the pickleball court folks put out a poll, they would have a different result. Whereas if I, as a private citizen, put one out, I might have another completely different result based on my friend base. So while it's a good indication of how the people who support the park or who support the museum feel, I think that that's where that ends.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted us to understand that we're absorbing information for the whole of a city, which will have different perspectives, and that's a part of it. I mean, it was put out there for an information gathering reason, which then the council deserves to at least hear that that information was gathered. How, which way, appropriate or not, needs to be said. So, David?
Thank you. I very much agree with Steve Sorensen's comments regarding establishing a user agreement with the city for the parameters around what activities are going to be taking place, so that we're not back in the same situation of misunderstandings, right? So from my understanding and observation, the city has currently fulfilled its obligation, all right? And this is something beyond that obligation that was agreed to prior. My concern, folks who know me know that I'm a policy and procedure guy. And my concern is we have multiple stakeholders. We have a public space, which is Pioneer Park, and we have many different stakeholder groups. As a governing body, it's very important to me that this council treat each of those stakeholder groups equitably, right? And so that's my concern, because without that, we get scope creep, and with scope creep, you tend to get or at least the optics of favoritism towards a particular group, usually based on numbers, right? And volume, numbers of people and how much noise they make or how much engagement they have. So I'm not really for or against necessarily the windscreens themselves, but I do think that it needs to be, as Gerald, I agree with Gerald that the initial motion was very plain and not sufficient to address all of the peculiarities and issues here. I think that signage has to be separate. It has to be a separate discussion because our ordinances speak to what the parameters for having signs are. And so that's a separate thing that we need to deal with. If we're going to pass a motion to say, if we're going to vote in favor of allowing windscreens, I think that our course of direction needs to speak to further action with regard to dealing with how to properly address the sign issue, the organizational structure of how that decision is going to be made, right? I think it's far more complex and multifaceted than just a yes or no on allowing windscreens. So that's pretty much the entirety of my thought on this so far. Thanks.
Tom.
I agree with you, David. I think that moving forward, if we do move this forward, that a contract is absolutely needed, just so that everybody knows where everybody stands, not only for us, but for the group as well. As I said at the last meeting, when I asked for a presentation to come forward, I don't play pickleball. I got no opinion on it, really, either way. I'm neither for it nor against it. It's just kind of there for me. But I understand it's, that a lot of people are playing it. I actually played a few rounds with Devin Biggs last summer when the first opened up, and I almost died. So there's nothing to say that, it is great exercise, believe me, but I'd rather sit in my boat. But I have had a lot of my constituents email and call me and asking me to vote no for the windscreen. If we're voting strictly on a yes or no tonight, I always told my constituents that I would vote for them. Like me personally, I have it, don't have it, I don't know. But if we're voting on to approve this with a contract and the lowest opacity and with the signage, then I may change my vote.
The motion on the floor is with the lowest opacity and signage. There is no contract attached to it, just to be clear.
Well, then I will make a motion to amend that motion to add that a contract be worked out with Zach Ruwink, our city administrator, to properly have all criteria met. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And criteria is very vague.
Okay, so that, yeah, go ahead, Steve. Help me.
Yeah, so first of all, you've really got this, because you really didn't amend them. You have to amend the amendment, or probably the thing you want to do at this time, David Holt, is you want to withdraw the second, and then restate a new motion that details everything you'd like to see. That is the clearest and cleanest way of doing it, if you want to do that.
It's Tom's amendment.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Motion.
Yeah, if you rescind your motion, then one that can detail all these things.
I'm going to clean it up first.
Okay, yeah, I can rescind that motion.
And you rescind your second?
Absolutely.
Okay. Therefore, that takes care of the friendly amendment also?
Technically, you have to vote to allow him to rescind the motion, so all in favor of rescinding the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion rescinded. Now, because it was a friendly amendment on that motion.
Nope. Now we have a new amendment. Somebody can make a new amendment, or new motion.
New motion. Take it, Dave.
Thank you for volunteering me. I appreciate that. But is Tom in charge now? I'll make a motion to direct city staff, primarily Zach Verwink as city administrator, Carrie Bladern as Pioneer Park, and the city attorney to work out a user agreement with the pickleball group for how to install windscreens at the Pioneer Park pickleball court, and also direct city staff to investigate what would need to be adjusted in order to get signage put on those windscreens. Do you find that adequate, Steve?
The only thing you left out was the opacity of the lowest opacity.
With the desire to get the lowest opacity in the windscreens available.
Daniel second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Gerald?
As we've been talking, I guess it seems like part of that agreement has to also deal with who puts them up and takes them down and where they're stored and things like that also. I don't know that that has to be part of the motion.
The word was install. That'll cover putting it up, taking it down, maintaining it. Okay?
Okay.
That's how I'm ruling on that word.
Ryan?
Thanks. The other thing that I would like to see addressed is the future planning for replacement, and if that's going to be a cost that the pickleball group themselves would facilitate and take care of, and not be at a cost to the city for the windscreens if that's passed. Also, because it's drawn a lot of attention, I guess maybe for the sake of all the stakeholders and the user groups involved, maybe consider having the east side of the courts not have the windscreen and just have the north, west, and south side. That would leave a little bit more transparency, and with the lack of wind on that east side, it would still be a very usable court and may make some other people happier with the windscreens being up. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that those items that were brought out by Alderman Rossing are easily part of this motion as you work on a user's agreement. So I would
Understood.
consider those, because whatever the user agreement is, it'll have to come back to this body for final approval. But certainly this moves the item along, which is what I think the goal of everyone is,
Yep.
if it's passed.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Lloyd, could you direct the other group to come back in? Under mayor, presentations. Justin and Jason, you're up right away. Walk in, turn on that mic. It's already 6:45. Yeah, right there. Yeah, go ahead and press the orange, the button. It'll turn it orange, and that's when you're speaking. Press it.
There,
Now it's
oh.
red. Orange, red.
Right.
Colorblind.
All right, sorry about that. All right, well, I am Justin Running. I'm one of the owners of Running Incorporated. We operate the taxi here in town. This is Jason. He's our regional manager who covers this service area. He's out of the Marshfield office and covers kind of this portion of the state. So he's along. I brought some preliminary numbers for the first few months of the year to talk about. A couple other points, and then I'll probably just turn it over to questions because I feel like that's probably the most productive use of your all's time. So being new in January, I don't have a lot of the historical numbers, so I can't talk comparisons necessarily, and coming out of a year with COVID, it's hard to compare them anyway. But January, that was our first month, we provided 4,255 trips. Then it was 4316 for February, 5118 for March, and 5506 for April. So we're seeing steady increase, which we would expect being a new provider. And then with the pandemic mix, we're seeing that increasing trend across the state. So that's the ridership number overview. And I don't know if, Zach, how the council is aware of historic numbers. I've got that sheet that I got earlier, but it looks like in 2019, January ridership was around 7,200. So we're a couple thousand off of that, but I would assume the pandemic's got quite a bit to do with that. Couple of the other things we wanted to talk about. One of the reasons, I don't know if any of you folks have had any complaints about wait times or if anybody's hearing that sort of thing, but that's an issue that we've been encountering all over. And the reason why that's happened is shortly after the pandemic began, the state gave us direction that they were to operate on a single ride or single trip basis. So this service that you folks contract for is shared ride taxi. So that means you can pick people up and drop them off all along the route, and folks from other homes can be in the vehicles with other homes. So as the pandemic got started, they wanted us to go down to where it was a single origin destination trip. So you're doing one, like family trips. So maybe a mother and a daughter or something like that, but we can't pick up two people at Walmart that don't live together and take them other places. So with the constraints of the grant and it being only able to provide so many hours, which is what's contracted for, the service was overloaded pretty easily. So last Friday, we got guidance from the state saying you're okay to go back to the multiple loading, the shared ride kind of methodology. But we're asking the municipalities to, of course, bless that decision. I mean, we're fine with it as a company. We would recommend you do it. And that's going to help in the wait times. There's still going to be peak times of the day. When you look at the numbers here, that 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, with the ridership volume we're seeing there, you're still going to have, essentially capacity issues there, but you're limited with the amount of taxis you can have on based on the amount of hours. So nothing that's probably out of the ordinary, but just so I'm not going to sit here and say that you will never get a complaint again on a wait time once we go back to multiple loading, because there are going to be peak times of the day where demand might outpace, or during the festival or other things like that we certainly can't handle. So those are kind of the two big things that are really, operationally here. We're very happy with how things are going. We've got some good staff, and I might let Jason talk about that, how he went ahead and got that done. But from a company standpoint, we're very happy with it. We know there are some complaints as wait times. We're looking at addressing those, but I'm going to let Jason talk about the staffing, and then I'll come back and we can do questions.
Well, thank the council for having us here. Thank you for us. In the beginning of this year, when I was told that we are going to be managing Rhinelander, I was super excited. I absolutely adore this community, so I couldn't wait to come up here. We came up. It was a little bit of a challenge in the beginning, obviously, with the pandemic. It made things a little difficult, but it was important to me to get to meet the people that were here prior. So a few weeks before our start date, I had met Patty Blasky. She's the supervisor. She was the supervisor for the previous company. She had a lot of experience with that company. And it was important that I got an understanding of the community through the members of the community. So I had met with the staff a little bit at the time, and we made the decision that the staff that was here was really important, that we kept that staff. And so Running Incorporated extended job offers to all of the existing staff with the previous company. No questions asked. If you work, whatever schedule you work now, that's the schedule you can keep, and you're welcome to stay on. And we decided to do that, and we were going to fill in what we needed to outside of that once that happened. And I'm glad to report there was quite a few employees that stayed. I'm glad Patty stayed on, so we have some perspective now of what things were like before and things now. It just helps us gauge any progress or anything that we need to work out. And so everything's going really, I'm so proud of these guys. It's hard for me to not smile ear to ear when I see the challenges, the monumental challenges that when you hand over a service that in essence, if you look at the numbers, is actually giving a ride to every man, woman, and child in Rhinelander at least once every month. And then on top of that, making it a single ridership to do that type of volume has just been phenomenal. Those employees really stepped up to help out the community. And with these numbers and how well they're doing, we actually added an additional vehicle to the fleet. So we are now running 6 vehicles. Previously we were running 5. So we have 6 active vans, each with a capacity of 4 to 5, depending on how those vans are loaded. So that's what we're working with currently. So real proud of that.
I don't have anything further. Is there
Any questions?
Questions?
Yeah, Gerald, it was a...
I have not heard any complaints about delays. What I have heard, even into February, was people having trouble finding your phone number. And I wondered what you've done to address that.
Sure, the new phone number is now listed actually on the website for the city. And in the beginning, once we had the vehicles acquired, we had to have the decals from the previous management removed from the vehicles and our vehicles brought in. We have since had all the vehicles now decaled with the phone numbers. We also have a website that's available, so they can go to the runninginc.net website, or they can just type up Rhinelander Public Transit, and it will take the citizens to that website, and they can get all the information regarding fares, hours of operation, which are pretty simple here, 24 hours, and as well as any phone numbers that they can call.
Eileen.
I was wondering, you did mention Hodag Country Fest, which is happening this year. Is there any way to increase your fleet for short periods of time in order to alleviate some of the wait times that are probably going to occur during that festival?
I can. We've had cities that we operate in that have had festivals like that, and if it's going to add service that would go beyond the hours of your contract, there are ways that the city can try to work through that with the DOT. It's not always a guaranteed thing. But if the city has a need and identifies the need and can put together what they'd like to see us do, we're happy to meet any of those accommodations, as long as WSDOT, we don't want to jeopardize any of your federal funding or your state funding. But if we can work with WSDOT through the process, we're happy to do whatever we can do. From what I understand is it's a big, I've not been to the festival, but I know people that have over the years, and I don't know if any number of vehicles is going to meet the need, but I think more than what we have now would be beneficial during that period, and we're happy to work with you any way we can. So,
Carrie.
It's my understanding that you still provide the Safe Ride Home program. And the only complaint that I received was from regarding that portion of the program is that, so at bar close, when, the bartenders want to close up and go home, they're having to wait. They were saying like an hour before a ride could come. So here they're trying to maintain clientele that are, probably at the point, where they're intoxicated and having to wait an additional time for that. So I'm just wondering if with this new rideshare thing, if you feel that that's going to improve.
Significantly. Yeah, so it's a twofold concern that needs to be addressed. I don't know if I can say addressed, but it's a twofold concern. One, especially at bar close, it's a cutoff time for many businesses, which results in an influx in demand. And we have to make sure that we are being strategic in how we are mitigating our hours, right? So we want to make sure that during the day, when people have their medical appointments and work hours, that we're running a majority of our hours during that time. So we're limited in the evening or overnight on what hours we can have there. So during that time, we generally have 2, and during busy times, 3 vehicles out, but generally it's 2 vehicles. So there can be a high influx in demand. So that could result in a wait, unfortunately, for a higher wait time. But because we're switching now back to the shared ride, we're talking about alleviating, we could do 4 times the volume of people now by comparison. So, and plus being able to pick up all those people at one business and drop them off is really going to help that considerably. Mm-hmm.
Any further questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Mayor's comments.
Finally.
Page 3 is a proclamation for Hodag Heritage Day, Hodag Day. The governor sent out a proclamation. I don't know if you saw that. The kickoff at Pioneer Park Historical Complex was a lot of fun, with the Rhinelander Chamber co-sponsoring with Ben at the Hodag store, and I forget the rest, but it was a good day. Hodag Pride comes out in full force at those types of things, so you can read that proclamation. Meeting minutes, approval of the May minutes, May 10th, 2021, council meeting minutes, page 4 in your packet. Gerald.
I'd like to move approval of the meeting minutes for May 10th with one correction, which is on page 6, at the end of the very long paragraph there. It should say the amendment was approved by a voice vote, and then the roll call was on the amended motion.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mikulowski, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Approval of the May minutes of May 17th, 2021. Council meeting minutes, page 9 in your packet.
Holt, I will make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from May 17th, 2021.
Anderson, second.
Here's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? With that being said.
Rossing abstains.
Oh, one more time?
Rossing abstains.
Okay. With that being said, any further discussion? Eileen?
Just that there's several places in the meeting minutes where my last name is misspelled.
Oh.
Everybody wants to put an S on the end, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Maybe she thinks there's 2 of you. Alrighty. Moving on. Reports from boards, commissions, and committees. Page 11 in your packet is the Special Planning Commission meeting. Anything that you'd like to add to that, Carrie?
Daniel, make a motion. Daniel, make a motion to approve the report of the May 18th, 2021 Special Plan Commission meeting minutes.
Anderson, second.
That was Anderson's. Oh, sorry. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those, Tom.
I was reading through this, and it seems like there's still hesitation with the nature trail by some people that you were addressing in here. Is that still an ongoing issue, or are they like good with this, or what?
So the development will come back before the body, so we can address those questions then, because it also has to go to the planning commission for a follow-up approval at the next June meeting, the first meeting in June.
Do you feel there's still a lot of hesitation with that?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, all right.
I can speak to that too. I'm pretty sure Reginald addressed it with the concerned parties as to, I think it's a CCR, is that right? Yeah, which will address those concerns, but it's a part of hashing it out. It's getting there.
Sure. Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Public hearings, Hode Cab Company, taxi cab license applications, page 13 in your packet.
I'd like to make, Daniel, would like to make a motion to table this until our next meeting, since there are some concerns with the application and the vehicle, as mentioned in the documents that we have before us.
Hold, second.
It will be tabled till our next meeting. We need to vote on it?
You do have to vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries.
For the record, that requires a 2/3 vote, but I heard it looked like a unanimous vote, so I would note on the record that the motion to table had a 2/3 vote, and it is a motion to table to a date certain, so it will be discussed at that meeting at that time. That's for the benefit of those of you that are here to talk about it. It will be changed to that date and that time. Understood? I'll talk to you in the hall.
Thank you. Ordinance, first reading, ordinance 2021-6, amending 5.02.13 electrical contractor license. This is page 19 in your packet, and this is the first reading. I'll accept the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve. First.
Thank you.
As presented.
Anderson, second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. Gerald.
Yeah, I just have a question. Is this the only type of license we have that's been eliminated? Is this something real new, I guess?
State statute changed. I don't know when that, in the maybe the last budget cycle or the cycle before. And so this is some cleanup, obviously. I don't think there were any other preemptions. I mean, there were a lot of preemptions I'm sure the legislature passed, but this is the one that pertains to the zoning code. So we, having just cleaned up the zoning code, thought this would be a good one to get out of the way.
Any other questions?
Well, just follow up if I could. Does that mean the state has any licensing for electricians?
Tom can address that question.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, there should be, but I don't want to misspeak.
So I believe it was actually a while ago, probably 2010, somewhere around there. The state came out with their licensing requirement for electricians, which then made it similar to plumbers, where any electrical work being done had to be done by a licensed electrician. Therefore, municipalities were no longer allowed to have their own requirements. So previous to that, we would require electricians to provide us proof that they were master electricians in order to do work, pull permits and do work within the city limits. And when the state made their official change, it didn't allow us to use it anymore. So we haven't been able to enforce it for, I believe it was 2010, somewhere around there where the change, 2014?
Yeah.
2014 is when the change was made.
Yeah, we're within the 10-year rule. Just kidding. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Unfinished business, we took care of that one. Introduction to new business, discuss the tax increment financing and review the current status of our TIFs with Ellers. Sean, you're up. Thank you for coming, by the way.
Push the button again. And
there you go.
Tara, can you pull up the presentation I emailed you for Ryan's benefit? Thank you. You can click OK on that, yep. There we go.
Okay, great. I've got quite a bit of material, and I'll try to go through it and want to be most sensitive to questions that the council has. I know right over to my right, you had a proposal that's come before the council, and talking with Zach and Wendy, the thought was maybe we need to take a step back and at least introduce what tax increment financing is, or reintroduce this to the council. So that's the bulk of the presentation today. And as I'd mentioned, I'm going to go through the material and certainly welcome questions as we do so. So if we move to the second page. There we go. So just real briefly, what is tax increment financing? It's really the primary and chief economic development tool that is used in Wisconsin, and for that matter, a lot of states, really trying to achieve goals of promoting job creation, tax base expansion, economic development, or redevelopment. And why is it a very effective tool? It's an effective tool because it ends up dedicating a committed source of funding for development projects based on the property tax revenue that the new development projects generate themselves. So it's not taking from other funds of the city, it's capturing new growth and using that new growth to help pay for expenses associated with trying to make it happen. And in the long run, it's a tool that the city benefits from, but so does all of the other taxing jurisdictions in the long run. So the county, school district, tech college, and everybody, and as well as the city's general fund. We can move to the next page. So how are the mechanics working? What does it take to make this generate the revenue that I was talking about? So if you can visualize an area in the city, and if we were to pick a contiguous area in the city, that property has a current tax value to it. And for the purposes of tax increment financing, that's called the base value. It's shown in the blue area up on the chart. The blue base value is taxed by all the jurisdictions, has been in the past, and even when a TIF is created, it will be in the future. So the school district, county, tech college, and city all get their share from that base value. But when you create a tax increment district, from the point the council approves that district, any new value, which could come from redevelopment or new development or even inflation, any new value is categorized as increment value. And taxes on increment value, instead of going to all the taxing jurisdictions like it does with the base value, it all goes to a special fund that the city manages. And it's not a fund that the city can spend on anything, and we'll get to that in a second, but it's a dedicated stream of revenue to achieve goals that you set out for that area, the goals of development and or redevelopment. So the tax rate's the same. People in a TIF pay their taxes just like everybody else. It's just where does their tax revenue go to? The increment value, the new value, goes to the TIF fund for a defined period of time. And I'll get to that in a minute too. So if we can move to the next slide. So one of the chief elements of creating a tax increment district is you have to create a project plan. And it's really the guiding document for what your vision is for this area and for the project itself. And it really describes, well, why are we doing this? Is it for blight elimination? Is it to promote industrial development? Is it for mixed use development, which is commercial, industrial, and residential potentially all together? And in that plan, there's a number of legal findings that have to be made. We generate and calculate what that base value is, and then we calculate what we expect the new value, the increment value, will be in the district. And we have to describe the projects that we expect to happen, both infrastructure as well as the development projects themselves, much like the potential project you see over on the easels over there. And then finally, and very importantly, what's the plan of finance to pay for these projects, and make sure that the tax increment district fund is self-financing so that the city doesn't have to cover expenses associated with it from other funds of the city. We can go on to the next slide. Just real briefly, there are a couple of legal findings. One of them, I'll just touch on a couple. One of it is what's called the 12% test. This is a test that you as a city currently pass. You're at about 6%. And what it means is you can't have, once you get to the point that your increment value in all of the TIDs you have is more than 12% of the total value of the city, you can't create any new districts. So currently you're able to do that. But as soon as you get above that 12%, your districts stay in effect. It's not like they have to be closed down, but you can't do any new ones at that point. And the other is really that I wanted to point out is you have to make a decision as to what kind of district are we creating. Is it industrial, blighted, environmental remediation, conservation rehabilitation, or mixed use? And there's various reasons why folks like myself and your city staff would suggest one type of district or another for the council to consider and the planning commission to consider. Okay, we move to the next one. The other very, very important finding that you make, and it is a key linchpin of using TIF, is you make a finding that but for creating the district and using that financing tool that I was discussing, a project would not move forward. Because the purpose of the TIF isn't to just capture increment value or new value and use it to pay for certain projects. It's to make sure those projects happen by using this tool. Whereas, just as a very simple example, if a new development was coming in and wanted to locate in the city, but there was significant street, sewer, water improvements that had to be done for this project to come here, and the only way that those costs could be paid for is by capturing that value from this new business and using their tax value to pay for that street, sewer, and water, that would be meeting the but-for analysis as an example. Okay. Next slide. Just wanted to touch on what do we commonly see in a project plan? What are TIF revenues used for to help encourage and incentivize a particular development or redevelopment project to move forward? My previous example just a second ago, public works and improvements, financing cost, which would be like interest on debt, land write-downs, community development authority payments, relocation, utilities, sometimes direct cash grants or cash incentives, of course, with a development agreement. And on the last bullet point, you're able to use, if it's consistent with the purpose of the project plan, you're able to use or pay for projects not just within the boundaries of the district, but also within a half mile of the boundaries. So that's a nice tool that sometimes can be real beneficial for communities. Now, these next couple slides, for those of you that have some experience with TIF, this might be a little bit new, but what I want to talk about on a spectrum is the two ways, two ends of a spectrum that we usually see a community assist a tax increment district with. One is what we call a municipality-funded TIF, or sometimes a traditional TIF. In this circumstance, the community tends to pay for the upfront expenditures, like say infrastructure expenditures. You issued debt, and as an example, you did do this for the Print Pack tax increment district that's currently in existence. And the city issues debt that's backed by the full faith and credit of the city to pay for street, sewer, and water costs, okay? But what you do at the same time is you create a development agreement with your city attorney and the attorney representing the development group or the business that says they're going to build a certain valued building to ensure that that new tax revenue is there to pay that debt that you issue. And that model can work very well. The one semi-negative of it is whenever you as a city issue debt, especially general obligation debt backed by your full faith and credit, if you have problems with the projects, even if you have a really good development agreement, you could end up having to pay for that debt out of another funding source of the city. You try to mitigate that risk as much as you can with the development agreement, but there's always that potential risk when you use the traditional model. We can go to the next slide. The other model, and sometimes I'll say at the outset, sometimes the models are used together. It's not just all one or all the other. The other model is a switch on the process in that model, the business or the developer, they come up with the funding for the TIF eligible projects, whether that's an incentive, site improvements on their site, or potentially even infrastructure improvements. You as a city, using the pay-as-you-go model, you say to the business or the developer, if you do this, and then you build your building and you create that new tax revenue, we will collect the taxes each year and then pay it back to you up until a point of reimbursing you for your costs. This model gets you to the same place. It does require that the development group has the funding to be able to get all of those costs paid for up front, but it's a little less risky, and you probably can see as I'm describing it, in that in a worst case scenario for the city, if the development group doesn't create enough revenue from their project, you agree only to pay them what you collect. And so you're not having to come up with funds from another source to pay, say, a bank or somebody who you've borrowed money from in that instance. And like I say, in many cases, for a tax increment project, both models are used. It's not just one or the other completely, but a mixture. Now, the next couple slides, one of the things that Zach and Wendy thought would be helpful is just to talk real briefly about some of the districts that you have right now, to kind of give you a little bit of the history of Rhinelander's use of TID. So I'm not going to get into this in depth, although certainly if the council has specific questions about any of these, I'm sure city staff and myself would be happy to talk more specifically. District number 1 is your environmental district, and it's, I think it's primarily condos, isn't it? Along the waterfront. This district redeveloped a site that was blighted previously and needed to be cleaned up. And what I would say to you, just big picture, is it's going to take pretty much the entire life of the district, but we expect it to reimburse all of its costs and close on time, which is a very good thing. And you have a much better site than you had at the outset.
Can you explain the shortfall payment also? Because that is another protection that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. That shortfall payments, I know it's hard to see up there unless you got it in front of you. That was the product of very good development agreement planning by the city up front. The project is not quite generating enough revenue from the new tax payments on the increment value, and we do have a development agreement that says, since that's the case, you developer need to pay us to meet the shortfall so we can pay our debt. The city issued debt that it has to be paid to a third party. So that shortfall payment, as the mayor pointed out, is an example of having a good development agreement and the developers meeting those shortfall payments so the city is not left holding the bag, so to speak, at the end of the day. All right, if we move to District 5, the main thing with District 5 I wanted to mention is this is a blight elimination district. It has a positive balance, which is always really good, meaning the TIF has excess funds in it right now. And the expenditure comes up almost a year from today. And that's the end of the expenditure period when you can do new costs and charge it to this fund. What I wanted to just let the council know is if there is no expectation of new costs, likely what you'll be doing with this district is closing it and returning that tax base back to the city's general fund and all the other taxing jurisdictions. So it's a district that has completed its goals. You could still have some other things before next May, but that timeline is fast approaching. All right, if we go to District 6, this is described as your airport business park. And this district has incentivized a number of projects. The development has created tax revenue, and you have an arrangement with OCEDC, so Oneida County Economic Development Corporation, that pays some revenues into the district as well to ensure all expenditures are paid. Based on our projections right now the district is past its expenditure period, so we can't get any new projects in here. Probably a couple years from now, in 2023, we project we'll have enough money to pay everything off at that point. So again, another successful district for the city. Now, the one challenge district that we have is District 8, and this is the Downtown Business Improvement District. And the big issue here is when the district was created, unfortunately, the taxable value of the property in the district has gone down. And it's actually down over 3.3 million from when the district was originally created. And the problem that creates is now you have to build something new that first covers that 3.3 million before you even get any increment value to create a revenue stream in the district. So we're talking now about some strategies to maybe try to turn this district around, and there'll probably be more to come on that. The end of the day shortfall is at the end of the life of the district right now is projected at around $50,000, which we don't want to end up in the red, but we have some time to try to correct that, and we're working on that currently. And finally, just real briefly,
Real quick,
Mayor?
what's the life of that district also? So if there's manipulation to happen, what kind of period of time do we have?
Yep. So Mayor, that one was created in 2010, so we can do expenditures through 2025 to try to promote development there. And the maximum life ends in 2030 with the final revenue collection in 31. So we have a little bit of time. And there's also some options on that also to do maybe an extension if you had to get a couple extra years. I think we could potentially do a 3-year extension on this district if we needed to, which would probably get us really close to covering that, that 50,000 shortfall. TID 9. Now, TID 9 has been financially very successful. This is the print pack district. It has increased taxes in that area, the increment value over 25 million from what it was when it was an original site. So 25 million in taxable value has been constructed there. The district has an expenditure period in 2027. And this is certainly a district, if the city wants to do some additional projects in that area or within a half mile of that area, this is a district generating almost $600,000 in tax revenue a year. Will pay off its existing expenditures relatively soon if things just continue as is. So this is a district where there are some options for the city to consider to do some additional things. And finally, district number 10 is commonly called the Toyota district. This district also has achieved its goal, and it did it very quickly. It was created in 2013 and is now at the point where there's enough funds in the district to pay off all the original obligations. Again, that's a very, very good thing. The expenditure period goes out to 2035 on this district. So the city does have the option of maybe doing some more things with this district, or the other option would be to close it early and bring that tax base back. So those are options before you. So, Mary, anything to add on these? Again, I think other than TID number 5, you have districts performing very well.
Thank you.
Okay, so the last part, I wanted to talk specifically about the Riverview Estates project and some preliminary work that we've done on that to update the council. They have provided us the same material that they provided you in their presentation, and we've begun our review of that. There's some additional steps that'll be needed yet. What we're looking at is, are they presenting everything that we would say needs to be presented as part of a reasonable TIF application or a request? The assumptions they're using, they have a very detailed pro forma of what they expect their project to be able to achieve. Are those assumptions reasonable? And do they represent a good reason to give assistance via a TIF? So in our preliminary assessment, and again, there's going to be additional steps with this, we do believe that their assumptions are reasonable. They'll probably be doing some extra challenging on a few of those, but overall, they do appear to be reasonable. And we're of the mind at this point that there is going to be, in order for this project to move forward and get them a rate of return, not a guaranteed rate of return, but a likely rate of return that's within the market range. You know, they're making a business decision. If they can get they believe they can get a rate of return here, they're willing to move forward. It's worth taking the risk. If they have a successful project, but it only gets a rate of return at this level, they're not willing to take the risk. And that's where the TIF can come in to help bring that project to that reasonable rate of return level. And that's really where we're at with them now, is doing the next step of a full review of their pro forma. And with that, what we're going to be looking at, if you go to the next page, one more please. What we're really looking at is comparing their numbers. I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but we're looking at comparing their numbers to industry standards in terms of their land acquisition costs, their construction costs, project costs, and then ultimately what they believe the rate of return is for them to move forward on a project. We don't want any of these categories to be unnecessarily high, such that the TIF is making an already successful, likely successful project more successful. That's not what we want TIF to be used for. We want it to be used for taking a project that would be challenged to move forward to a project that will be able to move forward because both the city feel it's a good investment and the development group feels like it's a good investment. If we go to the next page. So where are we going to go from here? We're working directly with their representative on a full pro forma analysis, and where that will lead to is a recommendation from us through your staff with your city attorney on what we believe the right amount of TIF assistance is for a project like this, and why we believe that's the right amount. It's a little bit of a back and forth process with the development group. It's not a simple, this is the way it has to be, back and forth and challenging the assumptions and discussing. But ultimately, we'll be back before you as you would proceed with a development agreement to make that suggestion of what we would recommend from our perspective is the right amount of assistance for the project. Okay. Now, the other element would be if they're going to need TID, there will be the creation of the district. And these two things can work on the same timeline. The analysis of their proposal as well as creating the TIF. And I think both those things should be coming forward to the council in upcoming meetings from there. But, and I appreciate you. I think I've gone a little bit more than my time, Zach. Sorry about that. But if there's any questions on either specifically what we're seeing here or on TIF in general, be happy to answer those. Or if you have some time to think about it and want to come back with questions, my contact information is in here as well.
Thank you. Carrie.
So in general, not necessarily regarding the Riverview Estates, but if one TIF district is performing better than another, can those funds get moved into the underperforming TIF?
There is a way to do that. Unfortunately, your one district that is underperforming is not a type of district, sorry, I should be talking,
okay,
is not the type of district that can receive money under the current state law from other districts.
Okay.
Gerald.
Just one general question. If what's to prevent the increment from being lower than expected because the owner decides to contest the valuation?
Yeah. Those are things, your attorney's back there, and he would be one to probably plug in on. Those are the kind of things in the development agreement you want to have addressed, I think, or at least talked about up front. The other thing I was going to mention is on the pay-as-you-go idea, in some cases, we're able to negotiate a look-back provision such that if the project ends up being more successful, either from a revenue generation standpoint or tax value, that maybe some of the pay-as-you-go payments aren't made because they don't need it. So those are some things. Maybe your broader question is, how do you mitigate what happens during the life of the district and some of the risk? Those are the things you can add into the development agreement to try to put the city in the strongest position possible. Least risk situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks again.
Have a safe trip back.
Yeah.
What's that?
Question, what's to district number 5?
Is that
I don't have my cheat sheet. in front of
Yeah,
me.
I don't either.
That is the downtown
Yes.
business.
Eight is downtown.
Did I
Eight
say
is
five?
downtown.
I
Yeah.
apologize. 8 is the one that has the cash flow issue. Yes.
Okay,
And
that's
that's
what I was
downtown.
wondering. I was thought,
Yeah, I misspoke. Sorry about that.
thank you.
Thank you. Moving on. Discuss approve the naming of Rhinelander School District Private Access Road Hodag Dome Drive for the addressing of the dome and recommended by the Planning Commission. This is misprinted in your packet, but we are correcting it now with the motion.
Larson will make a motion to approve the naming of Rhinelander School District Private Access Road to Hodag Dome Drive.
Barnett, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
I just want to address one question that many people may have. That's why do we have to name a private road? Because this is definitely a private road. It's not a city street. And the answer is because with our GPS and the type of systems we're using now, as far as E911, et cetera, we have to name everything. And in order for that to be done correctly, only one entity within a community can name things. That's, in case that comes up with anyone, I just don't want to think that this suddenly became a city street or a city road. That's the purpose, in case there was any questions about it.
Thank you. Discuss approve resolution 2021-12 to grant WPS the easement of the utility distributions, page 22 in your packet. Gerald?
Well, I have a question that we have two exhibits that don't seem to match each other, and I'm trying to figure out what we're actually asked to approve.
It's the second exhibit.
Okay,
I think it's on page 29.
okay. That's the one that looks more recordable.
That's the one you should look at, page 29.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't have my mic on. The exhibit that's part of this motion is page 29.
I'll accept the motion.
Holt, I will make a motion to approve resolution 2021-12 to grant WPS an easement for utility distribution.
Larson, second.
There's a motion and a second. Further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss approve resolution 2021-13 granting Hodag Cab Company a taxi cab license. This is page 30 in your packet.
Please.
Make a motion to table this until our next meeting.
There's a motion to table
Holt, second.
and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Items tabled to our next meeting, which date? You know, they just June 14th. Thank you very much. Discuss and approve resolution 21-14 hauled waste rates. It's page 31 in your packet.
I want to know what hauled waste is.
Jim, why don't you get up and would you like to speak to this?
Essentially, anything that gets trucked to a plant or to a drop point near the plant. So it's septic, holding tank, porta potty, effluent waste, I guess is a better word for it.
I will make a motion to approve resolution 2021-14 hauled waste rates.
Anderson, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Tom?
Are these rates going up from previous rates?
They are. We did a market analysis, and some of this stuff, like the septic, we didn't adjust too much because we're already kind of on the upper end of that. But yeah, just a market adjustment. My understanding, the last time rates were reviewed was maybe 2014, something like that. So it's been quite a while. And at the beginning of the calendar year, you probably remember doing some rate adjustment. The one thing I'll ask a change to be made, maybe a friendly amendment, is to move it to July 1st instead of June 1st. So we actually coincide with a quarter a billing quarter versus doing something midstream.
Anybody like to make that motion?
Daniel, make a friendly amendment to our existing motion to change the date from June 1st to July 1st to coincide with the change in quarter.
Anderson, second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. The other thing this clears up is what waste we're bringing into the plant. We have a very good staff right now to understand what waste is being dropped off, when, and by who, and how. And I appreciate their diligence. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, Jim.
I was also going to add one quick comment to the last point the mayor made. We're now having an application process, and we're working through, as you probably see at the end of our last couple of agendas, trying to get the ordinance updated so we can actually better screen those and permit those to actually dispose waste at the plant. So I commend Jim for his prioritization of this work, and it's taken us some time to get here, but
Actually, I'm going to give him a round of applause. Character goes a long way, and I appreciate it, Jim. Discuss the city's organizational chart per 2.01.234A3.
So I sent there's a paper copy in everybody's mailbox. I should have put a couple notes on here. This was it's really the current version that's really in effect. It was approved probably 2017, I think, is when I saw in the file information on this. So you don't see any changes to what the current org chart is, but wanted to put it on your radar that I'll be bringing a refined version to a future meeting, likely the next meeting. One of the areas in particular that we're going to be starting to recruit for, and that's the Public Works space. And I won't say Public Works Director or give that a title, because it may not be that. I think we're actually going to press into a city engineer position. And that's something that's been discussed with city staff, that we really could benefit from having some engineering capacity on staff. The position is obviously vacant and is currently budgeted for, so we do have a funding source identified for the position. And then there's some other changes. Obviously, in the fire department, we've made a decision to take inspections in a different direction. So we're going to be bringing those, making the modifications to the org chart and bringing it back for your passage ultimately. But just want to put it on your radar, give you something to take a look at, and then if there's any discussion you'd like to have with me as it relates to the Public Works or any clarification, again, I'll bring those specifics to you, but wanted to put this on your radar that this is a work product item that we've been working on for some time.
Any questions? Moving on. Review, discuss UW Capstone Course Sustainability Plan recommendations. Of course, I left it downstairs too. So now we'd not bring it in, but whatever. There were a list of general consensus ideas that we can move forward with on there. I'm going to bring up one that is just asking for a motion, and I can make the motion to replace our outdoor lighting on our buildings with the LED caps projects. There's some savings with that, but what I was really wanting to do is point out to our policymakers here right now that when given a sustainability plan like that, that's your opportunity to direct the policy as we move forward. I believe there was a $8,000 savings a year annual by our biodigesters, if that's it. But what I would say as staff, what I would like from you is a motion to move forward with sustainable programs, to have our staff look at those as far as their feasibility. We got that from the energy port, but if the price of these lights are astronomical, well, then it doesn't make sense, and I understand that. But that's definitely a policy that we can look at as a city to become more sustainable. So yeah, I'll either accept a motion for that, or I will make that motion. I make the motion to direct our city staff to look at the outdoor lighting and the sustainability plan to move forward with replacing those.
Larson, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. I would really invite you guys to look at that and make those specific motions, or a general one or a large one to direct staff. It was discussed at a department head meeting, and I think they're excited about those opportunities to save money. And the last thing we should be is a hurdle for them. We should actually encourage them to do so. Thank you. Discuss policy for public surveillance cameras. Barnett.
So I was very adamant about getting this on the agenda because last week, I do have these little Wise cameras in the windows of my business, just kind of looking out on the street because of past issues I've had with that area of Brown Street. And I caught at 3 in the morning. The only reason I even looked at my camera footage was because there was a case of beer sitting in the area where the tree is with a whole bunch of empty cans scattered around there. I looked back at the camera and this was happening at 3 in the morning, well after the bar is closed. And there was just a group of guys standing there by the tree, leaning on the tree, having a good old time. Then one of them decided to start shaking the tree a lot to the point where I thought he was going to pull it down. I also caught one of these gentlemen urinating onto Brown Street. This really upset me, to say the least. Not just because it's near my store, but just because of the disrespect of our city and the image that we're trying to get across here. I think it's disgusting. I think that if grown adults cannot handle their alcohol to the point where they don't urinate in a public street, then they should seek help. It is with this vigor and love of my city that I am insisting that we move forward with these cameras on these streets. I think it would be a great tool for our police department to utilize. I think it would act as a deterrent for such behavior. And statistics have shown that just cameras alone, knowing that there's cameras there, do act as a fantastic deterrence. I contacted the city of Eagle River, who have cameras all over the city. And they said their crimes went down significantly because of that. I would like to ask Police Chief Lloyd to come up and address those statistics as well.
Chief Gauthier.
One of the concerns that was brought forward is having me assign my staff foot patrol downtown on weekend nights. And I can tell you that it's been a common practice, has been for years, that on weekends, my staff will park their cars downtown and do bar checks in the licensed premises downtown. That is done recurringly, has been for years. Not only do they do it by themselves, but they often team up with maybe one or two deputies to do that so it's done safely. And they're going into every licensed premise looking for people who are on probation or to be not unlicensed or not be drinking. They're looking to be visible to deter any type of altercations. And the problem is that's when they have free time. But when you have 2 at minimum staffing, the most at 3, and you have maybe an OWI arrest or a domestic or a mental health, then you literally have probably maybe only 1 car, if any, on the street during those time periods because of the time it takes to process a operating while intoxicated person, or the time it takes to do all the paperwork required in a domestic violence investigation, or the time it takes to take someone who's made comments about hurting themselves or hurting others, taking them to the hospital, getting them evaluated, and if they meet certain criteria and there's no room at St. Mary's, then it requires us to drive that person quite often to Oshkosh, which is a 2-person transport. And so we backfill, obviously, so the city has coverage. But so active patrol, we're already doing that. Now, when it comes to would the police department like a tool like cameras, I can tell you they're awesome. We used them quite often this past week. We had a rash of car break-ins on not only on one side of town, but several parts of town. We were, the one thing with cameras that are in people's private residence, they do not have to give us that footage. but the people that did have that shared that. So we were able to identify 4 of the suspects based upon home cameras and also cameras at Central School when they walked down Timber Drive. And because of that, we were able to locate and arrest the person that was the major ringleader with that. So as the chief of police, who's responsible for the safety and security of the city, any tool that will help our officers do our job better, increase our enforcement, increase the thought process of should I or should not do something, sure, I'm for it. My staff, however, does not have the time. Neither would the United County E911 Center have the time to sit and watch that 24/7. It would be an investigative tool for certainly maybe dispatch. If it was an IP camera, maybe they could pull it up starting at 2 a.m. If they're not swamped in dispatch, I wouldn't expect them to watch that. But they have capabilities with other camera systems at other locations that are IP cameras. So if there's an active shooter or there's a crisis going on, the dispatch center does have the ability to remote in and look through those cameras. So, but if something happened, in Tom's situation, it was reported, it was investigated. We found those people to be from out of town, from Texas. So we have a tool to go back and again investigate and attempt to identify people, camera stills of facial recognition that we can put on Facebook. It gives everybody in the community, and not only just Rhinelander, Facebook goes over, gives everybody an opportunity to be a detective. And we have a great deal of success identifying people who are involved in criminal activity based upon their photo that's on our Facebook page. So would I be in support of something like this? Absolutely. It's just another tool in our toolbox to keep our community safe.
Yeah, and just to make it clear, like Police Chief Gauthier said, it's not a camera that's being watched. Just like my cameras. I don't check the footage all the time. I check it when I see something out of the ordinary. And that's exactly what this would be. And it doesn't have to run 24 hours a day. Brown Street is a very active street during the day. It's the overnight hours that are the problem. So you don't even have to run it 24 hours a day.
David.
If memory serves, the major question and concern about getting this done was the storage. So it was the IT capacity, what server, what facilities would these be stored on, and also, if memory serves, I feel like we've been talking about this since this side of the table was elected in 2018. I might be wrong about that, but it feels like it came up really early on in my tenure. Ryan might be able to give more specifics because I think that he's also asked for it as well. Personally, I would be in favor of this. I'm really kind of surprised that it's still something we're sort of theoretically exploring. So I'm kind of surprised to see it just not go anywhere. I would like to see it go somewhere.
I'm going to refresh some memories also. The first time it was brought up was at the cut cords of Hodag Park for lights in the Northwoods. That being the case, when it came to that, it then went into policy as to where the cameras would be. Would they be temporary or would they move? Because they even talked about game cams. That since moved on to also downtown where it's been addressed, and we looked at it as part of the infrastructure of our computer to be able to handle it. It also would have to go through legal as far as how long we would have to hold on to that video, and or are we liable for video that then we do not follow up with a crime that comes up. Statute of limitations 7 years, and it was a rape that happened on the street 3 days ago, and we didn't see it because we did not monitor those cameras, and it wasn't reported. If you're getting rid of the technology, that could put us in a position. So there was substantial policies that needed to be looked at just for the cameras. We volunteered back to DRI also through Tom that if they wanted to make it a policy of DRI to put cameras in their front windows for that very use, that we get to use it when it's an issue, and as it's an issue, I believe you responded back that 91% of it or whatever do not want to have those cameras. Now, I'm not saying that it's a political issue. What I'm saying is there are policy issues that need to go into this also. It's not as simple as putting up a camera and knowing you have it. There's a responsibility with that information. So as it lingers, you're correct. It's lingered somewhat, but I believe the last time it came between council is whether or not it went on to borrowing for the IT upgrades and whether or not it fit into that. But I could be wrong, but that's my recollection.
Correct. You're correct. That is where it was left off, and that I think that's my issue. It was left off. Haven't heard a word about it since.
The borrowing issues for IT are on the proposed capital.
Okay.
That's
all encompassing that.
At the April council meeting, the council approved the tentative borrowing list with allocations for various funds and purposes. Now, I will say, in talking with Alderman Barnett on this before the meeting, or that sometime in advance of this meeting, that council really needs to approve a policy. And I haven't seen a council approved policy on this matter. So if we're going to fund something, great, and buy it, but we still need a policy on how it's operated, who controls the surveillance. And as the mayor said, there's alternatives. Cities have a lot of alternatives. Do we want to own the infrastructure and maintain it? Do we want somebody else to? I mean, there's alternatives there to be considered as well. So I would just offer those couple points.
We'll also take that as far as a big portion of this as an administrator runs the visions of the mayor and the council, and they run them out. We've been extremely successful with Zach when it came to that. There was a discussion of body cameras for police officers and whether or not the feds are going to pay for it. So are you going to wait for the feds to pay for it, or are we going to do it up front and take it out of our budget? These are situational things that you ride a wave somewhat of. Where is that finance coming from? What is the detriment to the finance? You brought up to yourself, I would want to pay for a golf course another day if we can have cameras. I understand that, and I understand that passion behind it. Our job is, and especially his job, is to find the best way to make that happen where it's not a if then and we're taking something away from somebody. Eileen?
As Tom mentioned, there are other communities that are successfully using these types of cameras, and so I'm thinking our best course of action might be to direct Zach to look into other cities of similar size and that operate in mostly the same way that we do with regards to police, and see what their policies are, and perhaps we can model our camera use on those communities.
Ryan dropped off, and I don't know if that was advantageous, because if I asked him the next set of questions, once again, he works for one. That being the case, then he also works for one that's staffed with X amount of people, with X amount of time, and with X amount of whatever. So once again, these go into the layering of how we handle our finances and our budget with what we do. Not saying it's not important, but there's a reason that delayed action happens. Tom?
But with policy, that it can happen. And I also know that it's not just a matter of storage. There's in today's technology, there are so many ways to do this. I mean, you could do a cloud-based and you won't have to worry about any kind of machine. There are ways to get this done. And if it means having to write a policy, then, okay, we'll write a policy. I think it's extremely important. I think I mean, if we had cameras on Brown Street, it wouldn't have taken so long to find the people that stole the hodag by the Rhinelander pub. I mean, there's stuff that happens down there. It's worth it.
Absolutely. Once again, that policy is what happens and where. Also, we have a 96 to 98% violent crime solve rate here in Rhinelander. So I think we do a substantial job of policing our people when it comes to safety. Now, safety of properties next. Then there's the next one. That would be a policy. Which ones are we going to focus on first? That's the reason for the basis of our decision. We're not just making a random throw a dart decision. We're going to make a good decision. David?
Before I make a motion to direct city staff, principally Zach, to investigate similar cities, I want to clarify whether or not Eileen made that motion. Was that a motion? Okay. Well, I would like to go ahead and make a motion to direct Zach to look at the camera policies of similar cities as a preliminary to us beginning to develop our own policy with regard to camera usage. Eventually, the funding of this and the mechanics of this will come forth. But I do think that we could go ahead and have city staff look into beginning to construct a policy around that.
Daniel, second.
There's a motion and a second on the table to direct Zach to look into city policies that are our basis of camera usage, right? That sum it up pretty close. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you. Discussing of changes to chapter 5.07 zoning. Anderson, page 32, I believe, to page 40 in your packet.
Thank you. I've, as I indicated last 2 weeks ago, I think there's a lot of sloppiness in the zoning code that we just passed. And I came up here with 7 pages of items that I thought needed to be addressed in one way or another. Some of them are very minor, some of them aren't. I had offered some suggestions here as to how we should proceed on it. Talking with the staff, it seems like probably it needs at some point to go back to the Planning Commission to look over this stuff. I've had some conversations with Mr. Roffers, the zoning consultant that the Planning Commission been used, and he seems quite positive toward most of the stuff that I mentioned as things that should be corrected or changed. So if I don't know if, since it was a discussion item, is a motion to refer it to the Planning Commission.
You can make that motion.
I move that we refer corrections corrections to the zoning code back to the Plan Commission, along with the 7 pages I've got here, plus anything anybody else wants to submit, and see if we can get this corrected soon while we're still thinking about it.
Absolutely. There's a motion.
Rossing, second.
It's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, Gerald, again for your diligence on this. Discussion resolution 2021-15, discontinuation of the right-of-way, page 40 in your packet.
How does this relate to what we voted on last time, to vacating the street?
This is the final vote.
Go ahead.
This is the final vote to remove it.
Okay, I move approval of resolution 2021-15 with the deletion of the word alley each time it occurs, because it doesn't belong there, and the deletion of paragraph C, which is redundant.
There's a motion.
Barnett, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Discussion approved change order number 14, not to exceed $11,000 to match for snowmobile crossing. I'm going to let Zach speak.
Mark's coming to the podium here, but this item came up in our Stevens Street walkthrough 2 weeks ago. We were looking at final punch list items as well as warranty concerns associated with concrete and curb and gutter, sidewalk, etc. out there. But Mark, maybe you want to shed light on the history on this request that I don't have the full picture
of. Sure. This is for the Snowmobile crossing. Currently, the Snowmobile Trail takes snowmobilers down Shawnee, crosses Stevens Street at that intersection. They continue down Menominee for 800 to 1,000 feet, then they head back on the trail. This discussion started years ago in the development of the Stevens Street project and what the city was going to do with the snowmobilers crossing Stevens Street once Stevens Street was reconstructed. Prior to the reconstruction, snowmobilers crossing wasn't that big of a deal because the road was in pretty poor condition. The discussion was, when you have a brand new street out there, are you going to continue to let snowmobilers cross? The discussion amongst staff at that time was, yes, let's look into the thermoplastic coating that you'll see on state highways, county highways, local roads around here. It's a thick coating that goes adheres to the asphalt pavement, protects the asphalt pavement. So Dan and I met with the Hodag Snow Trails president about a couple weeks ago to discuss it. And at that time, the president felt maybe the snow club could participate in the cost of this. Since that time, I've talked to the president again. Because that trail is not a funded trail, they don't have the resources to contribute. The cost of this crossing is $99.75 per square yard. The amount of material to go down is about 110 square yards, so it comes at under $11,000 for that crossing. So this, at the time that this change order was written, it was anticipated that the snow trails could possibly contribute 50%. As of today, they do not have money to contribute. So if the council were to move forward with this change order, there would be no participation from the Hodag snow trails.
The, real quick, possibly, the recollection I have of the crossing was that it wasn't going to be as it currently was, and partially because we were even going to fix those roads at some point, and we wouldn't have those be a part of the trail. Am I correct in that, or?
It's all a little foggy, Mayor. And I think that was dependent on the Hodag Snow Trails rerouting their trail. And I don't know if they had the capacity to do that. To reroute that trail, they had to get on private property. They tried going by Shepherd Lake, and they were not allowed to do that. So they tried making different arrangements to move that trail, but I don't think they were successful in that.
Yeah, because I recollect just that it wasn't going to be something we wanted to continue because of the two roads also. So I guess I was kind of surprised to see that this was on there as a crossing, just because I thought it was a done issue as far as that goes, that it was something they were looking to reroute or do otherwise with.
I know it was something that they were looking to do, and that came up in the conversation that we had. But again, I think they were unsuccessful in being able to reroute that.
Eileen.
So I'm confused. If the snowmobile club, if those two roads and the crossing are not part of the trail, so they're not going to contribute, yet they use that because they can't reroute it any other way. Am I the only one missing the point here, that if that is part of their trail then?
That is part of their trail system, but it's not a funded portion of their trail system. So they receive funding, federal funding, state funding for portions of their snowmobile trails, but within the city, they don't. That's all I know. I know nothing about this. This is just a conversation I had with the gentleman today.
David.
Can help me if I'm missing something here. In terms of explicitly where this is going to be, and because I didn't see anything with regard to. Is there a map in here that had exactly where it was going to be, or a description?
No, I apologize, and I didn't include the map on the change order.
I just I'm a little wary to act on it without a little bit more information about what the impact of that would be.
Ryan?
Okay, so I know where this is because I've used it before, and it's unfortunate that this got brought up kind of last minute as a change order. I think us as a city needs to be doing everything that we can to promote recreation, especially snowmobiling in the wintertime. So I guess the way I look at it is either we're going to protect the road that we just redid, or we're not going to protect it and we're going to continue to allow snowmobiles to ride across that portion because it's an imperative, important piece of the connection route for the trail system. So $11,000 is a lot of money, but I think, like I said, we should be doing everything we can to promote recreation and tourism in the city of Rhinelander. So I am going to make a motion to approve the change order, number 14, not to exceed $11,000 for the snowmobile crossing.
Miglowski, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Gerald?
I don't know if you can make a comparison as to how much this is going to save us on Stevens Street versus how much damage is going to happen to those other streets by encouraging the trail to go through there.
Well, it'll certainly save the asphalt pavement. A great example of the worst case scenario, I think, would be North Shore Drive by the hospital. Just as you get on the hospital side of the bypass, you see a 10-foot strip of asphalt pavement that's just potholes. And it may have been fixed. I haven't driven by there in a while, but that's a snowmobile crossing, and that's what snowmobiles do to that. So with a brand new road, and it's about 95 feet across there, so it's a big strip of asphalt that could be damaged. I will also caution you that this thermoplastic crossing is not permanent. It may need to be refreshed, and I've seen them go 3 years, I've seen them go 10 years. But it's you get a lot of traffic on Stevens Street, so it will have to be refreshed on occasion as well.
David?
If you choose to go ahead with
sorry.
that.
David?
I want to take the opportunity to thank Ryan for his explanation there. I am in full agreement with him that I believe our community should make every effort to encourage recreation, as it's a backbone of the economy up here. So I'm definitely in support of this. I just was wanting a little more clarification.
Tom, did you have something?
I think you also might want to consider is Menominee Drive's a future project, and it could be just a mill overlay project. And those snowmobiles travel down Menominee for a half mile. So are we going to do that for a half mile of Menominee too, rather than maybe fix the problem, find a different crossing area, in my opinion?
Yeah, I believe that was the first discussion that happened 3 years ago, was the fact that Menominee was due to be fixed because of the travel that it was causing there. And as long as it was still a crossing, that was going to be it. And this is just my recollection, but
I think one of the reasons that road's in the condition it is in is because of half-mile traffic. So long term, it could get pretty costly putting that stuff down on a half-mile stretch of road.
Thank you, Tom. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
My bad.
Thomas Kelly,
Aye.
Ryan Rossing,
Aye, if you can hear me.
Eileen Daniel,
Aye.
Carrie Mikulowski,
Aye.
Gerald Anderson,
Nay.
Thomas Barnett,
Aye.
David Holt,
Aye.
Andrew Larson.
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries. Future agenda items, anything that anybody wants to list? Eileen, sorry.
To carry Bladoran's concerns, I would like on a future agenda an explanation of why we now have drug testing requirements where we have not in the past.
We have a new insurance company, but sure.
I understand that, but I think just for the general public's understanding of what's going on there, since it was brought up today.
Absolutely. Carrie?
It was brought to my attention today that on the city's website, folks were not able to view the calendar portion or upcoming events portion. I did talk to Tara today about it, and although it might be something related to what browser people use, it should be looked at. So I would like an update on where we're at with the update of the city website so that our constituents can look at agendas and other things, not to mention all of the committees and stuff are not accurate. There's
Correct.
still dead people on there, so I'd like that fixed.
Removal of all the dead people. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thanks for raising that. I was struggling with